vast majority of stories are frustratingly predictable. There are certain rules and guidelines that creators have to follow in order to satisfy everyone. For example, the hero has to be smart and capable, overcoming their obstacles in an aspiring way, defeating their evil foes, and bring about a truly happy ending. The world of horror often isn't restricted by such rules, allowing the grittiest parts of our imagination to run wild. It's rare to find an ending in a horror movie that is truly inspiring and filled with the warmth audiences get from most of their communities. From cataclysmic stakes falling the wrong way, to a low-key slasher villain getting the better of a main protagonist, horror films of all shapes and sizes have made a name for themselves in delivering the bleakest conclusions in cinematic history. Sometimes though, horror outdoes itself in delivering the despondency, throwing up an ending that leaves audiences with their jaws on the floor and with an empty feeling in their stomach. I am Kirsten from WhatCulture Horror, and these are 12 of the most hopeless horror movie endings. Number 12, The Autopsy of Jane Doe. One of the creepiest and most original supernatural horrors, The Autopsy of Jane Doe is deep and dark throughout its runtime and culminates in some truly shocking ways. The story of an unidentifiable female victim of a mass homicide being rolled into the morgue of father and son Austin and Tommy Tilden. Olwen Kelly was chosen by Norwegian director Andre Øvredal to play Jane Doe as opposed to using a puppet or CG, and that decision really helps sell the eeriness of the film's settings and supernatural events. The Autopsy of Jane Doe reaches a climax when the father and son work out that Jane Doe contains the spirit of a witch killed during the Salem witch trials. The spirit begins using Tommy's body as a way of healing itself, torturing the older man in such a horrific way that he ends up begging his son to kill him by the end. Austin ends up being startled by another vision from the witch and falls to his death before the authorities arrive on the scene. The film ends with the witch triumphantly being carted off somewhere else, with the audience's two main characters left dead inside the morgue. Number 11, Saw. Most of the Saw franchise is centered around people's brutal battles to survive, being thrown into deadly traps by the Jigsaw killer that are designed to make them appreciate their lives more, should they survive, of course. The first movie in the series is no different here, stripping everything back to pretty much just two people chained at opposite ends of a small bathroom. As well as these two characters, Adam Streinheit and Lawrence Gordon, there's also an ongoing police story featuring a few more characters trying to unlock the mystery of who the killer is. All of these characters are pretty likeable on the whole, and the audience can't help but want to see the killer revealed and the characters set free. The end, however, is far more bleak. The two police detectives, Tap and Singh, are killed. The main suspect in the case is killed, and Lawrence saws his own foot off and is last seen dragging himself along the floor and off the scene. Adam is the last man standing by the end of the film, still chained to the bathroom pipe where he started the film. In one of the best twists in movie history, the true Jigsaw killer slowly starts to climb to his feet after appearing as a corpse throughout the entire film. Everyone ends up dying, and the true killer gets to go on his merry way with his identity still unknown. Can't get much more hopeless than that. Number 10, The Invitation. The Invitation is one of the most unsettling and suspenseful films released in the last decade, utilising a slow burner of a plot and some impressive direction from behind the camera to ramp up the tension and keep things enticing for the audience. The story of main man Will being invited to a dinner party for him, his girlfriend Kira and his old friends by his ex-wife Eden and her new partner David. The film rolls through Will's past traumas and haunting history with Eden, while simultaneously throwing a few hints along the way that things are not as they first appear. The first warning signs for the audience are presented when Eden and David begin talking about their recent trips to Mexico, where they met a strange group called the Invitation, who help those dealing with grief via an exotic form of spirituality. Eden and David also introduce Pruitt and Sadie to the group, who they also met in Mexico. The Invitation turns out to be a cult, who are encouraging David and Eden to perform a mass killing in order to be free of their pain. Whilst they are overcome by our two leads, the final shot of red lamps being lit across Los Angeles is a gut-wrenching showcase of how widespread this cult's reach truly is. Number 9, Await Further Instructions. Await Further Instructions is the story of a British family who wake up one morning to find themselves sealed in their house and told to complete various orders by a message on their television. A real interesting premise that delivers a tense opening couple of exchanges between the family, the film really erupts into something far more bizarre as the TV's instructions become more and more brutal. The characters' true personalities and paranoias come to the fold, and the whole thing becomes bloody mayhem before too long. The climax of the film reveals that a sinister, mysterious creature has been controlling the TV the whole film, and that it demands to be worshipped. It takes the form of an army of cable-like tentacles that sweep across the house and swallow up anything in its path. Whilst it is initially defeated by the film's two protagonists after failing to go after an unborn baby, the film's closing shot of the being's tentacles sweeping into and devouring everything within sight is one final hammer blow in this pretty bleak tale on responding to authority. Number 8. Brightburn. Superhero horror films are painfully underrepresented in the world of Hollywood, but Brightburn is this shining example of how good they can be when they're done right. The film kicks off when an alien spaceship carrying a small baby crash lands on a small farm in Kansas owned by Tori and Kyle, a couple who are struggling to conceive a child. The couple name their new kid Brandon. However, it turns out that the newest addition to the family possesses superpowers such as super strength, flight, laser vision, and the ability to tank a bullet to the back of the head. A troubled, emotionally torn child, Brandon begins to unleash his powers in increasingly brutal ways as the film progresses and culminates in a tragic final scene with his mother at the farm. Learning that she plans to kill him, Brandon hurtles himself and his mum up into the sky, lets her fall back down to her death, and then crashes an incoming airplane. The film's end credits sequence shows Brandon beginning his attacks on the world, bewildering newscasters and destroying buildings in the most anti-Superman move imaginable. Number 7. The Descent. A timeless classic in every sense and one of the best examples of British horror at its peak. The Descent possesses an ending so bleak and hopeless that it was actually changed to a more uplifting conclusion for its release in the United States. Aww. The story of 6 women who go on a cave spelunking adventure, The Descent is tight, claustrophobic, and so often hard to watch because of director Neil Marshall's use of close-up shots. The caves the women are crawling through get even worse with the introduction of the crawler creatures who reside down below. The film concludes with final girl Sarah climbing up a mountain of skulls and bones and finally taking in a gulp of fresh air as she pops her head over the surface. She reaches her car and has a vision of her friend-turned-nemesis Juno, whom she left to die in the caves. That's where the US version closes. However, the UK and Neil Marshall's preferred version rolls on to show Sarah is still stuck underneath the ground. She had imagined climbing out of the cave, imagined the vision of Juno, and well and truly caps off her mental break by closing the film with a vision of her dead daughter as crawlers close in around her. Number 6. It Follows. Low budget and a true indie favourite, It Follows is the tale of Jay and a mysterious force constantly hot on her heels. When Jay gets it on with her boyfriend, she's told that there is an entity that is going to be following her from now on. The entity can take any shape it wants, and whilst it is restricted to just a slow walk, will kill Jay if it catches up with her. Jay learns that she needs to have sex with someone else if she wants to move the entity on, but after it kills one of her partners and continues to come after her, she decides to try and kill it outright. An encounter in the local swimming pool concludes with a sequence of the entity being shot and the water slowly turning dark red. Jay and her friend Paul have sex. Paul then passes it by a group of prostitutes, and the implications are apparent for everyone else in the audience. The entity is dead. Paul has arguably passed it on to the best group of individuals in the world for this sort of thing, and he's now free to have a relationship with Jay. Except the film's final shot shows the two main characters solemnly walking down a street with a mysterious figure slowly following behind them. Number 5. Don't Look Now. Don't Look Now is one of the most gripping psychological thrillers to have emerged from the 70s and tackles the issues of loss, grief, and trauma following a loss of a loved one. The film follows couple John and Laura as they take a trip to Venice following the death of their young daughter Christine. Don't Look Now quickly begins to deliver on the weird front, however, utilising the colour red, the same colours Christine was wearing the day she died, throughout the film and keeping the audience in the dark with its big reveal until the very last second. Following the same red-hooded figure he had been seeing throughout the movie into a palazzo, it looks for a second that John and the audience might just have found the answers he's been looking for. The figure slowly turns around, however, and reveals herself to be a small, elderly woman who ignores his pleas and cuts his throat. Ending a film by killing off the hero with no resolution in place is pretty hopeless in itself. However, Don't Look Now goes one step further in intentionally everything despondent and confusing. Number 4. The Fly. One of David Cronenberg's best ever works, The Fly is one of the absolute must-watch films for fans of the body horror world. It is gruesome, gory, and caps itself off with one of the bleakest finales audiences had ever seen at the time. The film stars Jeff Goldblum as Seth Brundle, a brilliant but slightly deranged scientist that has created telepods that allow a person to travel from one place to another. Referenced in countless films, TV series, and music videos ever since its release in 1986, the telepods end up malfunctioning, and the film becomes a battle against time for Seth as he slowly begins his mutation into a disgusting fly-like creature. Ugh. The Fly is filled with a hopeless feel surrounding Seth and his transformation, with each and every scene doing a brilliant job in making the tragic scientist look less and less human as he continues to evolve. The film's final standoff concludes with the last remnant of Seth's humanity clawing his way towards his girlfriend Ronnie and pleading for her to put him out of his misery. In one final gut-wrenching sequence, Ronnie pulls the trigger on the shotgun she's picked up and blows Seth's head off. Number 3. Drag Me to Hell. Whilst he might have become more famous for his original Spider-Man trilogy, Sam Raimi will always be loved in the horror world for introducing Ash Williams and the Evil Dead trilogy. Whilst he might have written it before production of Spider-Man, Raimi returned to horror in 2009 with Drag Me to Hell. Drag Me to Hell follows the story of Christine Brown, a loan officer who is cursed by a mysterious old woman after denying her an extension on her mortgage in an attempt to impress her boss. For the next 3 days across the movie, Christine is tormented by the curse, but looks to have overcome it after exercising the button the woman cursed. The film begins its conclusion with Christine returning home and preparing to meet with her boyfriend Clay at the Los Angeles railway station. Clay then hands Christine a small envelope containing a small button, and by now the audience begins to work out what's about to go down. Realising they had exercised the wrong button and that the curse is still fair game, Christine falls off the platform and is quickly pulled down to hell, doomed forever. Number 2. The Blair Witch Project. One of the most famous films of its generation, The Blair Witch Project quite literally broke the internet when it came out in 1999. An extensive amount of work went in behind the scenes to generate the sheer amount of hype that The Blair Witch enjoyed, including shooting 20 hours worth of footage and creating a hoax about the actor's supposed disappearance. Helping to revive a previously dormant found footage genre, Blair Witch follows Heather, Mike and Josh, 3 amateur filmmakers who venture out into the woods of Maryland in quest to make a documentary on the legend of the Blair Witch. The film reaches a climax when Heather and Mike begin hearing Josh's cries and follow them to an abandoned house. The house is filled with the classic demonic symbols and children's bloody handprints and quickly picks off Mike, causing him to drop his camera and disappear from the film briefly. Heather heads into the basement where she discovers Mike standing in the corner of the room with his back to her. She screams, drops the camera, and the film abruptly ends with her being attacked off screen. Number 1. The Cabin in the Woods. The Cabin in the Woods is an ultra-meta, well-constructed horror film that really benefited from delaying its release until after Chris Hemsworth became an international superstar. The film opens up in a purposefully stereotypical way, featuring 5 of the usual horror movie cliché teenagers trekking off for a weekend alone in the woods. Staying in a cabin ripped straight out of an Evil Dead movie, the 5 teenagers stumble upon various strange-looking items in the cabin's basement, one of which triggers an uprising of an undead family that slowly start picking off each of the members one by one. It turns out that the entire scenario is a simulation hosted by a company that offers the blood of human sacrifices to the Ancient Ones, colossal beings that live underneath the Earth's surface. A whole load of commotion goes down as 2 of the characters, Marty and Dana, break through the simulation and come face to face with the director of the company. The director explains how Dana must kill Marty in order to appease the Ancient Ones below. When Dana decides that humanity doesn't deserve saving, the film ends with the whole world coming to an end as the Ancient Ones burst through the planet's surface. Pretty bleak stuff. And there you are, the 12 most hopeless horror movie endings. But let us know your favourites down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button as well as the little bell icon to be notified of any new videos coming your way. But for now, I have been Kirsten Ria from WhatCulture Horror, and I will see you in the next video.